Hey everybody, welcome back to Bos Bones. My name is Michael Prentky and this is season 2. We're back. I took a little break. Season 1 was awesome but exhausting. So I took a little time and super excited to be back and gathering up a new round of amazing trombonists. And the first one I've got here is a friend and incredible trombonist, Walt Bostian.
Cool.
So we met some years ago and he was an incredibly generous and friendly person. We played a little bit at his house in Watertown. He's since relocated, but really excited. I think he's like one of the prototypes of Bos Bones. If there's a Bos Bone, it's Walt. He's the
Well,
guy. So
Bostian, I thought it was named after me, right?
exactly,
Yeah,
Boston Bones
there
for
you
sure.
go.
So,
So,
welcome to Bos Bones. I'm really excited to kind of pick your brain about everything. And we were
yeah.
talking for a minute before this, and you were giving me all the good stuff. So, I want to get some of that again.
Yeah.
Um, I guess to start, why Boston? What brought you here?
New England Conservatory.
Okay.
I came up here. I auditioned I graduated high school in '87. I'm from Blacksburg, Virginia, which is a very rural part of Virginia. Virginia Tech is there, is the only reason anyone's heard of it. And I graduated there in '87, and I actually auditioned for NEC as an undergraduate, which I had no business doing. Really, the degree to which having it's hard for young players to imagine how ignorant it was possible to be of music and of trombone in the pre-internet era. I knew nothing, and I was the best trombone player in my high school, so as far as I was concerned, I must be great. And if I and there were no teachers down there really. I really hadn't had private lessons, and so a teacher would have said, no, don't audition for NEC. You're wasting your time. I audition. I mean, I'm embarrassed to. Fortunately, there's no record. That's another advantage. There's no recordings. But trust me, I was not good. And I auditioned for like NEC and Eastman and let's see where else, Cleveland, Northwestern. I
Wow.
had no business. And Peabody Conservatory, which fortunately happened to need a trombone player. They have since I mean, I don't want to badmouth my alma mater, but I'm going to do it anyway. They've kind of accepted that they're kind of a second tier operation. But in 1987, they were still trying to cling to that, but no one wanted to go there, and they needed a trombone player, and so I got in there, and
Hmm.
I was way. I mean, that was a tremendous eye opener. I mean, like I said, it's really just imagine. There's no internet. There's no, it wasn't like Christian Lindbergh CDs were in my local record store, which was how you had to acquire music. And I really had no idea. I could play the notes, and I had decent time and decent ears, and I thought I was it, man. And I got to Peabody, and just it was terrifying to hear uh, these players. And
Hmm.
but so anyway, but just I can talk more about Peabody and about the development. But what happened after 4 years there, I kind of caught up a little bit. I endured many humiliating situations, but stuck with it, and ended up auditioning for NEC for grad school and getting in, which was tremendously satisfying after my completely um, joke of an audition in '87. And '91, I auditioned and got in. So that's what brought me to Boston. I've been here ever since.
I can relate to that because I definitely get nerves sometimes in performance and certainly in audition. And I know that um yeah, I I don't think I had any business going to NEC either. I feel like some of the players there were so incredible and
Yeah.
I don't know.
It
I
is.
can't relate.
Yeah, but it's a good thing you did, and it's like sometimes I try to remember that, even just artistically. Sometimes really, if you just kind of don't say, if you have no idea that you shouldn't even be doing this, sometimes you don't know what you can do. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not the most original statement, but it is true. But it made things rough, coming to Peabody and having people immediately realize who is this kid and why is he here? Like,
But
so
that's kind of the thing, and sometimes it's those underdogs who work really hard and then they really just keep growing. They grow so fast.
yeah, and that's the other. And just to sound like an old guy, I keep harping on how different things were, but like just in terms of resources, not only just being around good players, but being around good instructors and having the record library. I didn't have the history of recorded music on my phone, so I didn't even, I had to find out that a piece existed. Like I'd hear older players talking about, Bruckner 7, and I'd be like, okay, I'd spell it Brook. I had no idea what they're talking about. Write it down. I'd say, this guy. And then I'd have, you go to the record library and then you'd sit there and listen to it, and maybe with the score, and just start to have, but those resources would not have been available to me had I stayed in Virginia. And just having that at my disposal was tremendous. And the vibe, it's interesting that given how little of my professional career has been, just that sort of Bruckner-esque orchestral playing, that in '87, again, their compact discs created a boom in the classical music market, because suddenly you could listen to Mahler 9 without having to flip a record. And you could listen to the quiet parts of Mahler 9 without hearing hissing and popping. And so, and record collectors suddenly needed to repurchase their entire collection on CD. So there was a boom in the classical music market, and orchestras, people started going to orchestra concerts more, and orchestras that had never had a 52-week season expanded. And it was the vibe when I got to the conservatory in '87 was, there is full-time orchestral jobs are a reality, and they're what you should all be going for. It was an unrealistic idea, but you're just in this conservatory and that's all anyone knows, and you just have this vibe of orchestral playing is it. Anyone who doesn't have an orchestral job isn't a real musician. It was just this, that vibe, and it can be anti-musical, but it could also be very, force you to, oh wow, I have to actually practice a lot, and I have to, all that. But it's interesting given how far I ranged away from that. I really, I'm sorry if I'm if I'm talking too much about here, but I only, I grew up, I played guitar and bass, and I was probably more into rock music than I was until later in high school. But I really only wanted to major in classical music because I just wanted to know music. I wanted to know, and I would see other older musicians in my town who hadn't studied and who had just sort of tried to play in rock bands, and they were burnout, and they didn't know, they were tired of hearing, the same Hendrix tunes or whatever, but they didn't know where else to go with it. And they didn't have, and I was like, well, I want to learn harmony and history and then see what's happening. So I went for that, but then I got caught up in this. It turned out I did actually love the trombone, and I loved classical music. I mean, that was the big revelation. Holy crap, classical music is awesome. And I just, so some of it was picking up on that sort of vibe of which I don't know if that was still the case when you were at EC, of orchestral playing is the only playing, and getting a full-time orchestral job is the only viable, the only respectable career. But and unfortunately, in addition to that, I did discover that I loved classical music. I loved the trombone repertoire. I loved the trombone. So that was, but it was a different, like I said, it was a different vibe, man. But I realized it when I graduated there in '91 that I was not where I wanted to be as a player. I had improved hugely, but I was not where I wanted to be as a player. So I auditioned for NEC and came up and studied with John Swallow, which was a tremendous experience.
I'm unfamiliar. Who's John Swallow?
He was really well-known teacher and player. He was principal trombone in the New York City Ballet for many years, New York Brass Quintet, which made some seminal brass quintet recordings. He was a member of that, along with old Toby Hanks, a lot of great players in that. And they recorded a lot of, like the Boza Quintet and things like that. I think they made the first recording of, a lot of repertoire was written for them. Anyway, Mr. Swallow was just a very well-known teacher. He's been dead for some time now. I was in his last class at NEC, but he was, he had the heretical idea, if that's the word I'm looking for, that one could perhaps be a professional, predominantly classical trombone player and not be in a symphony orchestra, which was a radical idea at the time. That's how he had made his career. You know, he was in the ballet, but he also did a lot of quintet playing, a lot of freelancing, and he wanted to be a jazz trombonist, and Bill Harris was his main inspiration. And he was probably 70 when I was studying with him, and so he was from a time when there was a lot more of that going on. And but he said he realized early on that his gifts did not lay in that direction, much like mine. I used to think that I could play jazz, and then I just came to accept that as a real jazz player, as a real jazz artist, that's not, my gifts do not lie there. But yeah, that's what brought me up, was to study with Mr. Swallow at NEC.
It sounds like he was a really major inspiration and kind of mentor that would kind of guide your path, because you didn't follow the orchestral path. What was it like leaving NEC, and how did you how was your career trajectory post NEC?
Yeah, well, I left NEC, and at the time, what you're supposed to have been subbing with the BSO by then, or the Pops or whatever, and that was not going to happen at that point for me. And I just I had no expectations, but I was like, I'm gonna play anywhere they'll have me. I started temping at New England Medical Center, but then just anywhere, I would really aggressively call. I started doing, kind of low-bred theater. I got in on some of that, and I was playing with a blues band. And I was like, I'll play anywhere for any occasion, whatever. I didn't, I was driving to New Hampshire, 3 hours in New Hampshire to make $50 on a blues gig, whatever. I knew that I needed to get on stage with other musicians and play. So I was, I'd work all day at New Medical Center, and then come home and practice in my crappy apartment, the Fenway, and then every now and then have an actual gig. And so it just, if you just sort of, that's the big thing is to just take everything. Like, if you're available, take it, and don't act like you're too good for the gig. I never showed up and said, well, I went to NEC and I studied with Mr. Swallow, and this isn't really me. I was like, what's the gig? What are we doing? And so I was auditioning at that time still, but not well, like you mentioned, I was a terrible auditioner. It's only it's interesting, given that I ended up primarily in theater, where consistency is probably the number one, 8 shows a week, and it's got to be there. I remember my undergraduate teacher said to me after a performance, a solo performance, and he was like, I don't know what to do with you, man. He's like, you'll play one movement as good as I would ever want to play it myself, and then the next movement you will just suck. It's like, I don't know what's going on, man. So I was very inconsistent, and so the way to get consistent, of course, is to get time on stage and just keep doing it. And sorry, I'm just yapping a lot here, but Mr. Swallow, I was very resistant to the idea. He was a real thinker and real. He asked a lot of questions. You play something for him and be like, well, why'd you do that? And why, and you better have an answer, And he was saying to me my second year, he's like, I'm not sure that the orchestral path is something that you would, that is the right thing for you. And I, of course, at the time just heard that as, oh, you're saying I suck, I'll show you. But I think he just temperamentally, I like, you and I both enjoy a wide range of music, and I'm really thankful to be involved with a lot of that. Although, again, I do love orchestral playing. I sometimes fill in at the ballet and with some of these orchestras, and I no longer take local auditions if they're up, like ballet bass trombone audition was the last one I took. And I finally have gotten more consistent. I think that was one of the only ones I ever taken where I didn't get it, not because I folded, but because I just, I didn't play myself out. So auditioning, we all know auditioning is rough.
Pretty rough.
Right? Yeah.
It sounds like almost like a combination of Mr. Swallow encouraging a more diverse path, but also you kind of had your own inherent interests as a kid playing rock, and I know that you play bass. So it sounds like
Yes,
that background also made a huge impact on your openness to playing gigs post graduating NEC as a classical major. Because I don't think most classical majors from NEC would drive up to New Hampshire to play a blues gig, you know?
that's true. That's true. I definitely, I think I benefited from not having the expectation. I knew with absolute certainty that the Pops was not going to be calling me to sub, So I was like, if I'm the only person who thought I was a musician at that point was me. So I was just gonna make that, do go where it took and play what was necessary. And it's funny because Mr. Swallow retired. He taught at Yale for many years, and when he retired, a friend of mine went down to his retirement party, and he said to him, hey, Mr. Swallow, Walt Bostian, he's playing a lot in Boston. He's really, he's doing well. And Swallow said, he goes, yeah, he goes, it's always the sort of second tier players that end up because they don't have expectations. Like I definitely my experience at EC was not encouraging in that way that anything was going to be handed to me. I just definitely knew that I had to, you know, if anything was going to happen, I was going to make it happen. I wasn't sitting around and waiting for somebody to call me. It was not going to happen.
Hmm.
But you're right. The bass has been. I kind of came. But you're right. I had more hands-on experience with different music than many just straight classical trombone players. You're right.
So what about Bim Scala Bim? Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah, well, I mean, I love the band. I was always a fan. I went to see them, long before they knew who I was, and they had Vinny Nobile, great trombone player, the guy who plays on most of their albums, and really the guy who is really the Bim Scala Bim trombone player. He left in something like '97, and they put an ad in the Boston Phoenix, and I was like, oh, because I'm not shy on stage. I go berserk. I'd seen them. I knew what Vinny did. I was like, I can totally do that. And I had all their albums, and so I called them, and they didn't get back to me right away. I actually called the machine and played one of their tunes on the machine, and that got a call back, right? And so they listened to me, and they listened to a number of people, and they went with not me. They went with Mark Paquin, a fantastic player, who also is a bass player and is also an excellent saxophone player, from New Hampshire. And so he joined in 97 rather. And he did it for a while, and then he left, and there was kind of a revolving door. John Ferry, the founding trombone player, came back. And then in 2000, they had been using Chris Rhodes on trombone. And then he was nabbed by the mighty Bos Tones on very short notice. Dennis Brockenborough, the founding trombonist, left very abruptly, and the Bos Tones they had a whole sheet of stuff, and they just grabbed Chris Rhodes, and it was like, sorry, but the Bos Tones was a much bigger gig, and anyone would have taken it. So there's no hard feelings with Chris. They understood, but they had a sheet of gigs themselves, and someone that had seen me going berserk with the band Bellevue Cadillac said, well, you should call this guy. And so the lead singer called me. He didn't remember that they had already rejected me once, and I thought about not mentioning that to him, but I thought, I was afraid that I'd walk in and be like, hey, we already told you, and so I said, I got to be honest, man, we've met, and I did play for you once. And he was like, well, I don't remember that, so come on back. So I went to their space, and this time they were like, yeah. And they I didn't get any rehearsal or anything. They were like, they had a gig on the Cape, and they said, we'll see you there, and sent me a set list, and that went well. And then like my third and fourth gigs with them were the Montreal Jazz Festival, so that was huge. And so I ended up doing it, a lot of it, for the last 2 years that they were a regular band. Although even at the time, I was pretty busy in the theater, and I knew that was more I foolishly thought, not foreseeing the pandemic, but I foolishly thought that I thought that seemed to be a more long-term thing. And so one of my terms for joining BIM was I am going to need to be able to sub out, occasionally if I have something in the theater, because I wanted to continue to build that. And but they were accommodating. And then in 2002, the guitar player moved to California, and the singer moved to Panama, and it sort of dissolved. But now we still do reunion tours. Vinny does a lot of them, but what Vinny can't make, I fill in, and it's great. I mean, I still play a lot of Vinny's solos from the record. Do you know Vinny Nobile?
No, I
Great,
don't.
great player. And I still play a lot of his solos from the record because I just love him. And I like, he doesn't even, on some of the tunes, like he came to see the band, because again, he left on good terms with them. He came to see the band when I was in it. And afterwards he was like, yeah, you got me down, but it's okay to do you too. And, I was like, oh, okay. Because he's like, I don't necessarily play the solo from the record. And I'm like, but I love that solo. So, so I still, as I've talked about, my strengths are, I just feel like I feel less confident in my improvisation. Although in a ska, R&B vein, I feel more comfortable. But so yeah, BIM. I think I will be doing some dates with them in August. We're talking about getting some stuff going again. There's still Dan Vitale, the singer, is very into it. I believe they just released a new album, so I might have to learn some new tunes. But yeah, that's so definitely look for us late August, early September.
Nice, that's great.
Yeah.
So you start to talk about an interesting rift there. It's almost like a fork. There was this sort of like, oh, the club and touring life option is over here, where you can sort of be the touring trombonist playing with BIM, Scala BIM, and then, or, I mean, hopefully not either or, but kind
Yeah.
of choosing between the pit world. And we haven't said so far, but for those who are unaware, I think Walt is sort of known as the kind of king of theater in Boston, the king of trombone musical theater. If there's a Broadway show in town, he's usually the trombonist playing.
Yeah,
So
I've been very
how did
fortunate with that.
how did you get reigned the king? How did you get that crown in
Well,
musical theater?
there are a lot of fine theater players in town, but I have been very fortunate. And I again, just aggressively calling the contractor of the North Shore Musical Theater, Jay Daly, has a brass quintet. And they, at the time, were doing a lot of school concerts. And he needed someone, and a lot of it is being people's radar, because people quit things a lot. And same thing, he needed someone pretty abruptly. And so I came in and did a whole bunch of school concerts, and I ended up kind of being a member of his brass quintet. And then again, he contracts the North Shore, and so when people are bailing on him, he's like, oh, well, this guy in my quintet, he's seems all right. So he started using me there, and it was again fortunate that there was kind of a void, and that he the biggest thing was just being in there frequently and being receptive, because I wasn't, theater playing is we and I have talked about this, playing together. Theater playing is a very different approach, and it takes a while to learn it. And I felt like sometimes every 4 bars, Jay was the lead trumpet, would be leaning over and saying, okay, do it this way, this way, this way. Like I just felt like every night there was, and it was great, and I was receptive to that. Fortunately, I think a lot of players, again, maybe it's from my being a lower tier player in AEC, I was just more receptive to this is what I want to hear, because as you know, our job is to make the lead trumpet player sound good usually. Unfortunately, I mean, I love the trombone, but a lot of times that is our job. And so I was fortunate in that he was willing to, rather than just be like, well, this guy doesn't know what he's doing in the theater, he was like telling me how to do it. So for about, I don't know, many years, I played there a lot and kind of learned how to do it. And like all of us, I wanted to play downtown, but sorry, I think I've got things opening up on my screen here. Okay. But everyone does. So there was never any openings or anything. But when I ultimately was the producers in 2002, and Mel Brooks, bless him, would only sanction a tour for what was then the most popular, it was the Hamilton of its day, if they took the full orchestration on the road, and that's the only reason they did, because Mel Brooks would not let them have the show otherwise. And so all you other producers and authors think about that. But so there were 3 trombones, and it ran for 12 weeks, and 8 shows a week for 12 weeks with 3 trombones. There's going to be subs, and so eventually there was sort of perfect storm of every other player in town wasn't available on this one date, and someone said, well, this guy Walt seems to play a lot of North Shore. Let's try him. And so I went in, and and fortunately by then I had brought enough experience to the table that it went very well. You go in for an audit, and you don't get a rehearsal, but you go in for an audit. And I got the CD, and it's never the same with the CD of a Broadway recording, but that gave me some idea. And I had enough advance notice. I played along and just did my homework and came in and just tried to lock in with the guys. Again, I was Jeff Galindo, great player, was playing lead, and Peter Sorelli, really great bass trombonist, and just sitting between them and just trying to lock into what they were doing. And that led to more subbing on the producers, and then that just led to being more of a presence. And unfortunately, at the time, a lot of shows started getting down to 1 trombone. And I'm also I'm a strong bass trombonist. Sometimes I work as a straight bass trombone player, and so at that time they suddenly started wanting guys that could play tenor and bass trombone. And so again, just right place at the right time. But theater, reading has always been something that was a strength of mine, even when many other aspects of my playing were wanting. I was always a strong reader, and that's really important, because they just, in the theater, they just expect to be able to put something in front of you and you read it. And as long as there's not an error in the part, they don't expect to hear any errors, coming from it. Sometimes if you do a break-in show, we Pippin at the ART a couple of years ago, we come in, there'd be an entirely new song on our stand, and the conductor would be like, yeah, this is cue number 7 tonight, we're playing it, so make sure you have that. We never played it before. So
wow.
And they just expect, and there's not a lot of rehearsal. Shows, national tours come through, and so anyway, that's just stylistic. I know I'm ranging about it, but just one thing about that is different with these national tours. They're always carrying musicians, and these musicians have been doing this show 8 shows a week, sometimes for years. So they know your part way better than you do, and the smallest accent, the smallest space, the smallest, they become huge when you're doing it every night. And these guys, sometimes it's a real, they want to hear it a very specific way, or they become very unhappy. And so definitely, I think one thing that aided me was Mr. Swallow was the same way. If it was on the page, he viewed it as there for a reason. And so I was definitely receptive to that, and of course solving my consistency problem, because that's got to be the same. So I think, again, right place at the right time, being an experienced show player before I ever got a shot, at the sort of bigger theaters downtown. And it just played to some of my strengths, like reading and the stylistic thing, and just being able to observe. Like I said, it's amazing how fanatical, particularly, like, say there's a lead trumpet player. A lot of times shows carry a lead trumpet player. So this will be a player that's done the show literally thousands of times. And this player, he or she will definitely know exactly what they want to hear. And sometimes, because you go crazy playing the same times, eight times a week, sometimes we'll become very upset if they're not hearing it. So the ability to remain calm and give them what they want to hear goes a long way. So that's what helped me.
How do you manage that? I've always been kind of amazed. I can't imagine doing the same show, hundreds or even thousands of times. How do you manage that mentally?
Yeah, well, I part of it is like we've talked about. I mean, I love jazz. I love jazz playing. I love attempting to play it, but I have grown at 52. I have accepted the fact that it's not. I will never be a top shelf jazz player. It's not in my talents. And so I like making music with other musicians. I like high level ensemble playing. And, there's only 12 notes. So I feel like and when you're doing something, so often in our business, we're scuffling, people are sight reading, and we're just trying to keep smiling and get through. And so I just love the experience of being able to get something sounding really good, which 8 times a week, it can be, it's definitely hard for some people. I have some friends that are, that I consider to be, real jazz artists, and they don't like to play the same thing 2 nights in a row. And sometimes we'll be sitting there and I can just watch them just really struggling with the fact that we're going to be doing this 60 more times. And but fortunately, I like I said, I enjoy. I mean, it's I don't know, temperamentally, I just seem to be suited for that. I tend to err towards the being a creature of habit in my practice, and having these routines. And so I don't know if that sets me up for it, but yeah, I've never toured anything. I've done the most, I would say I've probably done The Lion King maybe 400 times, and Wicked close to that. And there's a number of shows I've done well over 100 times, but nothing like, here in town, Paul Perfetti, a great trumpet player, he spent something like 17 years on the road with Les Miserables. I mean, how many thousands of times, and I've never, 400 times compared to what some of these guys do is like nothing. But
wow.
I don't know. Well, you're a much better jazz player than I am, and you've done some theater. Do you find that? Do you get frustrated with the same thing, or do you?
Yeah, I mean, from the theater gigs that I have done, which hasn't been that much, but I don't know, like maybe I'll do a couple weeks of a show, like just weekends. It won't be like, every day, 8 shows a week, but
Okay.
like maybe 3 shows a week or 4 shows a week for a couple weeks. And like towards the end, I can relate to that kind of itchy feeling, like okay,
Yeah.
doing this again. But
Yeah.
also I can relate to trying to get something to like really just hone in to those microscopic details, just like every little thing, just trying to get it as good as possible and really blend
Yeah.
it together, and kind of leaning into that process.
I love that. I love the connection, with other musicians that way, and just that really is my greatest thrill in playing, I think.
Yeah.
Mm.
Hey, I was wondering, do you have any like really funny or good theater stories? What's like the most embarrassing thing you've seen in a pit or in a show?
Uh, let's see.
Embarrassing or just funny, silly?
I mean, I'm trying to think. Some of it's fairly off color that I probably wouldn't want to, but alternate lyrics to songs we certainly come up with, many of which I wouldn't repeat. But occasionally there's prop failures and things. One time in Wicked, there's the longest dialogue in Wicked is maybe 6 minutes. It's a classroom scene, and the actor who was doing Dr. Dillamon, who's the teacher, he just lost his place entirely. And he was the regular actor, and it wasn't like he was drunk or anything like that. I think he just suddenly had that momentary fear of, wait, what's happening here, and he just forgot. And the other actors were trying to help him and thought, well, weren't you saying something about? And meanwhile, the conductor, we're all just reading because this is the longest scene. And the actor's like, guys, I have no idea what's going to happen. So he's just watching him, like, I guess I'm going to drop the next cue. And eventually he just went, class dismissed, which is the last line of a 5-minute scene during which some pretty crucial plot stuff happens. So they just went on with the show. Yeah, it just skipped. Like a friend of mine was actually at the show who had never seen it, and I was like, did you notice anything there? He's like, yeah, but he goes, I thought I had just missed something. He's like, I thought I had zoned out. I didn't know what was going on. So that's one of the more like I said, I mean, there's a few that are definitely I'm sorry to sort of tease about it, but that are definitely too off color to repeat. But I'm trying to think of something that strikes that involves the musicians. I mean, to break the monotony, sometimes we do funny things in the pit because if we're out of sight of the audience or whatever. I mean, Lion King, there was a scene change after a big thing in the second act with a lot of drums that we weren't playing on, and so I would do different choreography, and the whole pit would turn around and to see you doing a lot of stuff. And one time in Cats, the orchestra in Cats is never in the pit; they're always back in the trap room, so we can't be seen at all. And so during one of the Mr. Mustafali, where I wasn't doing much playing, I would actually get up and do all this choreography and just to try and make people laugh. Because you would, I guess that's it. Like in Lion King, I did, the first time for 32 weeks with Mark Cantrell, great bass trombone player. He's retired from the bass trombone now, but there was one soft entrance I had kind of, and he was just determined to make me flub it. And so he would like, put his tongue in my ear or something like just every night it became, okay, what, or like, make a ridiculous face and it was just, it keeps you in it. It just, and he wouldn't have done it if he didn't know that I was, that it was going to happen. But that was always fun to see it because I'd see that approaching. I think, oh Lord, what is this maniac going to do now? So something like that. So that fun stuff like that, just to keep it as long. And the MDs recognize that we're, as long as you're taking care of business, they're pretty cool with some more than others. But yeah.
I want to back up a little bit. You were talking before about kind of like changes that you've experienced over your time living here in Boston. For instance, when you were at NEC in the 80s, you were noticing like a huge boom in classical music, mostly from CD sales, but you were saying how it suddenly seemed like there was almost like a light, like there's a path, there's actually a big path towards classical music and the orchestras are doing well.
Right. And then and the Empire Brass was huge. It was a viable to think that you could have a professional brass quintet. It wasn't a crazy notion.
And also you were saying, even in the musical theater world, I mean, there was maybe mavericks like Mel Brooks who decided to, insist on this kind of a setup for his show. But at the same time, you were saying it was much more common to have 3 trombones in the pit. And now it's maybe 1. And if you're 1, you have to be doubling. And
yes, that unfortunately.
So it's kind of shrunk.
Yeah, that's the trend. Unfortunately, we're trying to do something about that. I'm the chapter director of our local Theater Musicians Association, which is part of the Musicians Union, and I'm on the theater committee with these collective bargaining agreements. But what happens is that a lot of times these tours want to go out self-contained. They don't want to hire locals, and the agreement called Pamphlet B is the touring agreement, and 802 in New York will sign off on these tours going out self-contained, and that means that locals aren't hired anywhere. And also, just like you said, instrumentation gets cut down. Book of Mormon, which I love, tours with it's 9 musicians, and you'd think, oh, they really cut it down. No, it's 9 in New York also. It's like, just imagine, we think about a Broadway show, you think orchestra, and it's supposed to be all extravagant. 9 musicians. One trumpet, 1 trombone, 1 reed doubler, 1 violin, viola, and then guitar, and that's it. But it just unfortunately it seems like that's the way it's heading, and there's all sorts of depressing news with them becoming better at the big fear was I'm blanking on the name, the VPO, Virtual Pit Orchestra, and that was going to replace us all. Because when you're singing to pre-recorded tracks, as you lose, it becomes karaoke, you lose flexibility. So VPO they had something called a tapper, where a person would tap the tempo and the entire orchestration would adjust to the tempo. And that was supposed to recreate the sound and feel of an orchestra. That didn't work. Particularly the brass sounds were terrible. So fortunately that didn't do a lot. But now there's every time I'm at a meeting, there's scarier news about how good they're getting at solving the problem of having non-live music still sound live, and that's scary. So we're kicking around things. We want to do positive pamphleting, letting the audience know. I personally feel that our strongest argument is to let the audience know that they're getting ripped off. They're not lowering ticket prices, so we let them know, do you know that in New York, this was a 24-piece orchestra, and in Boston, it's 8, and you're paying the same amount of money, because if we say, oh, I wanted to be a professional trombone player, and now this job is being cut, you're not getting a lot of sympathy. People will be like, well, big deal. I wanted to be starting center fielder for the Red Sox, and it's like, so. But if we say, you're paying a lot of money for a product that is not what you think it is, I think that's a stronger argument, because of course, ultimately, I think they are I think the audience, the non-musician audience, tends to assume that there is a full orchestra down there. And so, hopefully, but unfortunately, it's and especially, with it now, we're going back to the table to negotiate coming out of the pandemic. And as you can imagine, they all want to cut the pay and cut the number of musicians and cut all sorts of stuff. But hopefully, and there's, there's always the great thing about Boston. There's a lot of theater going on. Oftentimes high schools will have budgets. I play at high schools sometimes for their musicals, and they'll pay decent money. And there's regional theaters and community theaters and stuff that often, community theaters will pay the actual musicians sometimes. So there's that, and there's always, but if there's one thing, like you and I were talking before we started recording, I definitely have learned in this pandemic that I love playing, even if there's no professional reason to. So I know that I will continue. Hopefully it will still be, the same type of playing, but I know I'll continue playing anywhere they'll have me. That same 1991 post NEC attitude I had, I still have. It's like, maybe I wouldn't drive to New Hampshire for $50. I would now. Like we were talking about. I mean, I've been reading quintets with these guys for no reason other than to do it, and stuff. Have you done a lot of brass quintet playing?
Not a ton of quintet playing,
okay.
Unfortunately, no.
Well, we've been taking apart just pieces that we've all played a billion times, and really working them, which we would never have done if it weren't for the situation. So, and we will hopefully, by the time this gets out, we'll have some concerts set up, because we've all agreed we're going to go, set up some concerts. And it's just a 45-minute program of just some, classical brass quintet, like everyone can't get enough of, right?
I think the situation has helped everybody introspect and maybe not everybody, but many of us get a clearer sense of what is most meaningful, especially as players. And for some of us, even just the joy of practice, even if it's alone, that has sort of come out. And for some other people who aren't into practice, unless there's a gig, they realize that. And I guess the importance of socializing and playing with other musicians, playing, even if it's just rehearsing, just for fun, just to play, or performing.
Absolutely. I'm very, a good friend of mine plays French horn, was coming over last summer. Frequently we would just play duets for hours just to keep sane, because I like the possibilities that Zoom and that recording has opened up, but for me, there's no, I don't know, maybe a younger player would be more, but for me, there's no comparison with.
No, it's not the same.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I mean, you can record remotely, but it's still not the same as playing with another person.
Right. That kind, and of course for teaching, so much of what we do is modeling sound and modeling style and playing duets. I mean, I I just learned so much. Mr. Swallow would, he was like 70. He was still in the ballet, still sounded great. He had us playing these crazy Marcel Biche and Roger Boutry, these French etudes, and I'd be in there, not doing well. And Mr. Swallow was old school in that he swore quite a bit. He never once referred to it as the trombone, but the effing trombone. He didn't say effing. And but so he'd be, I was his lesson right after lunch, so he'd be eating a sandwich and I'd be going, and he'd be like, effing Boston, hey, put his sandwich down and pick up his horn, completely nail it. And be like, see what you made me do. Now I'm not going to be able to play tonight. It just, but it was still hearing him do it, and that's just a big part of teaching, and playing in real time. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. on a serious note, I want to
Yep.
ask what what has your experience been in oh, hello?
Yep. I'm here.
Okay,
Can
cool.
you hear me?
We're yeah. Just had a
Yeah.
connection issue for a second. We're back. Hello, hello, hello.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The video is a little bit fuzzy. Okay, I think we're back now.
Okay. I could see and hear you at full strength the whole time. So I don't know if that tells us anything, but
It's fine.
okay.
So anyways, I wanted to ask you kind of on a more serious note, what has your experience been, if anything at all, with I guess sexism or like your experience with, I don't know, women musicians, or like what have you seen, or the culture, or how things been changing, what used to be acceptable or like at least more culturally happening, and have things been changing? What have you been noticing?
I don't have a lot to report in that area, just as largely of my generation, trombone players tended to be almost exclusively male. Um, uh, they're so uh,
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't, it hasn't, and again, it's uh, uh, yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're just, when I think of, I mean, certainly, there's certainly some fantastic women trombone players even around my age, and some of the young ones are really spectacular. And I'm sure that they have, I haven't personally witnessed, I'm sorry, I'm not being very articulate about this, but it really is just, I mean, when I was in AC, there were literally no women trombone majors at the time. So so it wasn't a matter of not seeing. I mean, of course, the fact that there were none tells you something right there. But I don't think they were rejecting people because they were women. But so in terms of the educational environment, it was just it never came up because there were actually there was a woman tuba player, but not a woman trombone player
Hmm.
when I was there. I know shortly after me, Karna Millen came through, and she's just, do you know Karna?
No.
She's
Who's
a
that?
she is a spectacular, but she's in the Coast Guard band, and I believe she still plays in the Albany Symphony. And I believe she was the first woman to sub with the BSO. I might be wrong about that, but she is a fantastic player, real beautiful sound orchestral player, like really top shelf orchestral player. And but she came through NEC a little bit after I did, so she wasn't there at the time. But I believe that she's still in the Coast Guard band, and I think the Albany Symphony, but I'm not sure. I haven't run into her in a while. But I think there are a lot more women trombone players your age. Is that correct?
That's my impression. It seems like there's a
Yeah,
lot more. I don't know if there's any single reason why. It's probably a whole combination of things, but
yeah.
yeah, just curious.
You know what? I just this part of being old. I've just remembered. I'm very sorry. There was one woman trombone player when I was in AC, so I'm sorry about that. Despite having emphatically said that, there was one, and she lives in Israel now, and it plays it with a klezmer. She and her husband have a klezmer group, and she's a very fine player. But she was the only woman trombone player there at the time.
Oh, wow.
So yeah.
Yeah. Um, okay. Well, seems like things are kind of wrapping up a little bit. Is there anything
Yeah.
else that you wanted to share about your career, or I don't know, your time in Boston, or how'd you
Uh,
settle in Boston? Did you ever think about leaving or going to another city?
Well, it was kind of all I knew at the time, and it just sort of worked out that way. I think had I been offered a tour early on, like one of these non-union bus and truck tours, I almost certainly would have taken it, and who knows where I would have ended up then. But it just seemed like a place where there were opportunities, and I was already with the woman I would end up marrying. I've remarried since, but so that was another factor. But it just seemed like a place where there was a lot of opportunity. It certainly was never a question of going back to Blacksburg, Virginia, simply because there weren't, I mean, there are no playing opportunities there. And I always knew that I wanted to play. And there certainly seemed to be a lot of good players here in town. And you know, I was always, I don't think, one of my regrets is I don't think I took advantage enough of reaching out to other players just to get together and play. I was always very intimidated, as you can imagine, from going to Peabody in '87 and really being, you know, literally people were like, why are you here? You know, I mean, and I just always kind of had that. And sometimes my friends now even still have to say to me, stop thinking of yourself that way. You know, that's not, you know, you're not that guy anymore. But I think I would encourage young players to you know, get together and play with people with you know, it's surprising, you know, people love playing and people love hanging out and talking about playing. And I think if I had been more aggressive about that, I might have, now again, I'm very pleased with the gigs I've had, but I don't do as much orchestral playing as I would like. And certainly I still practice, you know, orchestral excerpts every day and all that. And I think some people my age were more aggressive about reaching out to people and saying, hey, let's get together and play and let's do that. And I was always like, they're gonna tell me, get out of my house, you suck. And that's always been the back of my mind. So Boston, that's one element of Boston that I don't think I took advantage of enough, was that there really are, you know, well, like, you know, you contacted me and I was like, well, come over, let's do some playing, you know, and you know, it was great, you know. And well, now that this thing is over and we're all vaccinated, we'll have to do that again, right?
For sure. I'd love to come back and play. I mean,
Yeah.
super fun. If you could go back in time, who would be some of those players that you would play with in town?
Well, I mean, the guys I went to NEC with, I mean, were scary. And it really is amazing the high percentage of guys that are still playing. Darren Acosta, I don't know if you know Darren, he's principal of an orchestra in Finland now, but he was for many years first call with the BSO and he played whole seasons with the BSO when Ron Barron was on sabbatical, or when Norman was on sabbatical. Anyway, unbelievable player. Mark Hetzler, he was in the Empire Brass. He teaches out in the, I think in Wisconsin now, just terrifying player. Brian Deal, Brian's still in town, great player, plays in Springfield, plays, you know, everywhere. You know, these were all guys I was in EC with, and they were nice, but I would typically run from them. And if I could go back in time, because now I know them, you know, now I talk to them on Facebook and stuff, and you know, I would have said, hey, Darren, let's play some duets, you know, like he knew he was way better than me, you know, but it would have been a learning experience, you know. And I wish I had been less intimidated and less assuming that, you know, that these guys wouldn't want to do it, you know, because I just to hear them, you know, in the same room would have been great. But I would when I was in EC, I was so intimidated. I think I tended to more bury my head. I don't even want to know, you know, who's out there. I just want to pretend that what I'm doing is good. And that's not the way to be, you know. You gotta, there's, because they're out there regardless, you know, and it's almost always a pleasant surprise when you sit down with somebody. Like I said, I still message with Darren regularly about stuff, and I wish that when we were at EDC at the same time, that I had just knocked on his practice room door and said, hey man, you want to play some row shoes and octaves, or you want to play some duets? And you know, now knowing him now, he would have said sure. And yes, it would have been scary because he was way better than me, but it would have been valuable, you know. So I wish I hadn't been so scared to sit down with guys who were way better.
Are there any venues in town that you miss, or what are some of your favorite venues that might exist or might no longer exist?
Yeah, well, I mean, I love the Opera House. I never once walk in there without feeling lucky to be down there. My wife and I were walking around the Common a couple weeks ago, and I said one thing. I said, you definitely, even if I never play there again, You never heard me complain about playing there. I definitely didn't take that for granted. I think the Paradise still exists. I like playing there. I still call Boston Music Hall Harper's Ferry. I don't even know if it's called something else now, but had some good nights there. You know, North Shore Music Theater is always a very special place where I did play there many times. Geez, a lot of the rock clubs have kind of turned over and changed since I've been. You've probably played in more of those type of venues than I have, but the old House of Blues in Harvard Square was not good. Very cramped stage, because you know, going there with a horn band, but of course the new one's a different story. New ones, I think it's where Avalon used to be.
I think so. It's right next to across from Fenway Park.
Yeah. So that's always and you know, there's so much history. Like in the old Colonial Theater, you know, that's where Follies broke in the early '70s. A lot of legendary shows broke in there, and it kind of looks the same. And that's very cool. There's a lot of history there. I think that's where Oklahoma first premiered. And it's very cool to walk around there and think, you know, various people who have been there. I was disappointed to learn that what's now called the Boston Opera House wasn't what was called the Boston Opera House in the 19th century. That was more around Symphony Hall. And I had thought that I was playing in the same place where like Enrico Caruso and all these opera legends had sung, and I found out that was not the case. That was not when people say the Boston Opera House in 1910, they don't mean the same one. But,
so did they mean Symphony Hall?
No, the building doesn't exist anymore, but it was there. I read a really great book. I don't think I have it around, but I think you would. I don't know if you know this book. It's about a history of jazz in Boston. Through like 1960.
Vaca, right?
I think
Richard
so.
Vaca.
I think so. My brother gave it to me for Christmas, and have you read it?
I mean, if that's the book I'm thinking of, yes, I read it.
So he talks a lot about venues and you know, there's whole streets that don't exist anymore and all that. And a lot of the guys he mentions in that book, I was seeing on big bands that I would go to, you know, in the early 90s, and I had no idea who they were. I just thought they were, you know, some old guy like Vardy Hartooni, and I was like, oh yeah, he's just some old guy. And I read that book, I'm like, I kind of wish I had talked to him a little bit more.
Yeah.
You know, because there's been a lot of great history here with that.
Yeah.
So, who was your teacher at ANC? Was it Luis Bonilla?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was lucky. I got to work with him for 4 years.
Wow. Speaking of scary players.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, I've never met him, but I'm a fan. He's
amazing.
What a player. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. How about any favorite gigs or worst gigs stories?
Well, one of the best times I had was the show In the Heights, which is by Lin-Manuel Miranda, who wrote Hamilton, and it was touring self-contained, meaning not hiring any locals, and it was in Boston, and a friend of mine, Paul Barron, great lead player, was touring as the trumpet player. And so I had seen him. We'd hung out while I was in town, and then he called one night, and the trombone player, the touring trombone player, had a family emergency, and he was like, "Can you come down and play tonight?" And I didn't know the show at all, and I said, "Sure." And so I went down, you know, and we talked through the first act, and then you know, we played the first act, and then it went very well. I had enough experience in Latin music that I didn't get freaked out when suddenly the four sound like the one, you know, and I knew stylistically, because I love that music, and so I was able to match. And Paul, I'd done many shows with Paul, so I kind of knew, you know, and he really kept me in it, you know, and it was great. And that was probably one of my favorite experiences. And that was, it was funny because originally the guy was going to be gone, they thought, for the weekend, but the music director, who didn't know me when I came in, he was like, yeah, this is just for tonight. I don't think we'll find out if he's coming back or not. And I was thinking to myself, you just want to hear if I suck or not, and then whether you can use it. And so at intermission, he was like, okay, so we just got a call. He can't make it in. Are you available for the whole weekend? I'm like, yes, yeah, I can do that. So and I actually ended up going on to Buffalo with the show until he was able to come back. And Chris Renneman, he's a great New York player. And he was, so that was one of my favorites. Probably the worst in terms of theater. There was a show in New Hampshire, in Nashua. It was a vanity project. Some guy had made a lot of money, like in the plumbing business, and had written a musical. And boy, was it not good. And it was all about, it was sort of semi-autobiographical, and it was basically about how awesome. It was about a guy who was totally awesome at football and music and everything. And then I don't even remember, but it was 3.5 hours long. It was dreadful. And it was just, it was really, now, we talked about being able to do 8 shows a week. That was the one time we did it over 2 weekends. And I honestly think if it had gone on another weekend, I would have had to sub out and just, I'm like, I cannot sit through this thing for another, I mean, it was, like I said, I won't say the name of it or anything, but it was just,
like, what was so bad about it? Like the songwriting or the lyrics, or
the lyrics, the songwriting, lyrics were an embarrassment. The dialogue was just awful. At one point I was amusing myself by, I had a feeling this guy, he's a rich guy and that he was not open to suggestions, and I think that a lot of times these guys are under the impression that when, say, Stephen Sondheim writes a show, he just starts at Act 1 and just writes the show, and then that's the way it is. When, of course, the reality is these geniuses revise everything. If you read about the history of some of these shows, Sondheim would go in, and be like, no, that song's terrible, and he'd go write a new one, and like they would cut and rearrange. Like he definitely, these guys definitely did not have attitude about all. And I think this guy just thought that everything he wrote was gold. And so I was amusing myself by counting the number of times one character said to another some variant of, "You've always been there for me." And it was, I don't know, 30 times. I mean, like any competent playwright would have told him, you can't have your characters just say this line this many times. Like, find another way to say it or don't say it. But it was just that type of thing. That's one reason it was so long, because it was just these cliches, and it was just, but in the theater, it's gotta, they're always revising, and this guy was not open to that. I think that's what made it such an awful experience. It would have benefited from being half as long. Literally 3.5 hours. There's operas that are way shorter than this. So, and I love opera. Richard Wagner is my absolute favorite composer. So it's not the length that was my issue there. So, but and then there's always the usual, like you've done. I'm sure I've done many, the weddings where no one's paying attention, or the even Bim Scala Bim. We would be. I remember thinking, oh, this is such a great band. It would be great to be in a band where people come out and see you, because I'm used to doing bar gigs to no one. And, we play the Middle East downstairs for 650 people and sell it out. And then the next night we'd be somewhere in Connecticut playing to like 4 people. And, that's always a drag. I mean, there was one time where with Bim, we were booked into some ski lodge in Vermont. I don't know why, but no one came. And there was like literally 2 people there in this big empty lounge. And then eventually they left, and we were literally playing to no one. And the bartender just kind of waved us off. And then, and this is with a pretty successful band, Bim Scala. And the bartender was like, yeah, you guys can go. Like, oh, that was all, so I'm sure you've experienced, you just never know where you're getting booked. And that's what's depressing. Is playing to no one. Oy.
Yeah.
But yeah. So but it's great to play anywhere. And great, and as you know, there's often, I'm sure you've experienced, there's a disconnect between how much. Sometimes I find it crazy that we'll play people play a jazz gig 3 hours for $25, and then you'll play some function, some graduation where you're playing a total of 10 minutes and made $350. It's like, okay, there's not a lot of connection between how hard this is and what the pay is.
Yeah. Well, you're working with the organizers and the union, right? So if you figure that stuff out, you can get back to me. Let me know.
Definitely. We're like I said, we're gonna try to get some contracts back in place with these things, but just get the word out. If you go to a show, look in the pit. Are there live musicians? If not, did you pay full price for the ticket? You probably got ripped off.
That reminds me, I wanted to ask you before, is there a way that people listening to this, like, I don't know, lay people or musicians who want to, I don't know, advocate for live music and theater or whatever, do you have any recommendations for how they can channel that energy?
Yeah. Well, I really think that if the theater going public was aware of the extent to which they are hearing less and less live music, I think that they would be unhappy about that. The Rockettes, they no longer come to town, but they came in and tried to do it on tape, and I would talk to people and say, "Oh, we went to the Rockettes, Radio City show," and they're like, "That's all on tape, right?" And they're like, "What?" Like, they're really upset, and they tried to argue contractually that it was technically not a musical since it was all pre-recorded. Even the taps are pre-recorded and they're lip syncing. And they said, so
Wow.
technically, this is not a musical, it's a modern dance performance. Because we have language in the contract that says, some of these modern dance troupes, that these pieces are conceived with pre-recorded music. And so we're not going to, if that's the conception of your work, we're not going to say, no, you have to use an actual orchestra, So they tried to argue that it was technically modern dance and not a musical. But so, I guess if, get for the labor, just make people largely aware of the issue. I think most people, if you say, do you want to hear a show with live music or pre-recorded music? I think most people will say live, obviously. So I think they really trade on the fact that people think if I'm in the Wang Center and there's an orchestra pit and I'm hearing orchestra music, then there must be an orchestra. And so, and that, unfortunately, that's really not the case anymore often. I mean, it's rare that you'll go in at a union. Most union houses, you won't be hearing completely pre-recorded music, but if they could, they would. And so they need to feel like audiences would care. I mean, if they could replace the actors with holograms, they would. like they unfortunately. So audience education is a big thing, because I think it's our belief that people would hear the difference if it was all pre-recorded and if they would care. So don't, if something's on tape, don't support it. If that's if it's important to you, I would say I think the Rockettes definitely, once we got the word out, I think people were definitely less interested in paying full price for a show that is not, because of course in New York it is a full orchestra, and that was our argument, was that the assumption of the audience is going to be that this is live music, and you're not making that clear that it's not. So
sure,
and people definitely want that. So we're fighting for it. We're saying
appreciate it.
Yeah. So let's see, man.
Cool. Well, I think we should probably wrap it up. It's been about an hour.
Okay.
But I appreciate your advocacy for live music. I appreciate your stories and history and knowledge and wisdom and everything. So it's great reconnecting with you. Yeah.
And hope to play with you soon, man.
Likewise. Thanks, Walt. And
well, sure thing.
I'll see you when I see you.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Comments, questions, send me an email at bosbonespodcast@gmail.com. That's BOSBONES podcast@gmail.com. Or follow me on Instagram, YouTube, or Spotify. You can connect with Walt at facebook.com/Walt.Bostian. That's BOSTIAN. or you can email him at waltbostian@comcast.net. Trombone Icon by Gregory Montigny from thenounproject.com. Special thanks to Celine and Jeffrey. The Bos Bones theme was written and recorded by yours truly, Michael Prentky. Again, please follow at Bos Bones on Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify, or visit at michaelprentky.com/Bos Bones.